The arguments on this amendment are very interesting. Let's go with the first half of the arguments. It says that they're concerned because a plant in Pennsylvania and a plant in Michigan are being required to be stay open, and that this is from the Secretary of Energy, and that there's no plan, and that there's no cost allocation. However, the bill actually sets up a process where a complaint has to be filed. I heard that comment made. No complaint was filed. Nobody was saying the plant should stay open. In my bill, a complaint has to be filed, and it can't be by the plant operator. It has to be from somebody else, another utility, somebody in the area who's actually going to use the power. And so the first half of the argument would argue that the gentlelady ought to be supporting the measure. Now, the second part of the argument, I would oppose the amendment for because it is redundant to the existing requirements at FERC and seeks to misrepresent the intention of the legislation. As we know, FERC must already adhere to cost causation principles as a part of cost allocation determinations and ensure that all rates are just and reasonable. Under the legislation, FERC would be empowered to both determine the compensation for plant owners as well as cost allocation for rate recovery. These determinations must already meet the requirements of cost causation principles and be just and reasonable. Again, that's if we're using the 207 process, which I'm trying to put into a position to be more preeminent when we're looking at these power shortages within the grid situation. It's our hope the legislation would only be used rarely and that our nation has sufficient resources to meet our electricity needs. Unfortunately, because of a lot of confusion, maybe even some obfuscation by some states and electricity market participants, we're in a situation where it is, frankly, very confusing as to who looks out for grid reliability. This bill will help to clarify the situation, and the amendment only makes it more confusing. We are seeing a dangerous rate of premature retirements of baseload power. Just this week, in this heat wave, we are seeing utilities asking customers to save electricity. TVA, for example, and they serve part of my district through some of the companies that are affiliated with them, has asked that everybody reduce their power usage today because they're concerned about potential rolling brownouts or even blackouts. But I would note, and I know that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle really dislike coal. And as we shift, and I think coal still has a place, I think we can do it cleanly, but we'll disagree about that. But as we're shifting, we need to make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So in 2013, the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, announced plans to close 8 coal-fired power units, citing a flat demand for power. They've closed 5 of them. Now they find themselves in a growing demand for power and a heat wave, Mr. Chairman, that is requiring them to notify their customers to not use all of their power. Because if everybody uses their power, as they would normally do, they may have a rolling brownout or even blackouts. And then human lives are put into jeopardy. What this does is it says, all right, we're going to have FERC take a look at it, and people have to notify FERC 5 years in advance. That's what the bill says, of closing down any power plant. And if somebody complains and says, wait a minute, we don't have generation coming on board, Mr. Chairman, in time to sufficiently cover the needs of our area, and we're using that power, we need to use that power to wheel it into another location, as was done at the Potomac Power Plant, where the only time that 207 has been used effectively, to power Washington, D.C. so Congress could keep operating in the heat. It says we'll allow that, and it can be up to 5 years, but it doesn't have to be 5 years. If it's determined that enough power is coming on board in 2 years, then so be it. It's a 2-year order. But it gives FERC that responsibility, not the Secretary of Energy, and not, as the gentlelady said, and I don't know the circumstances of those 2 plants, but she indicated that it just happened with nobody asking for it. In this case, somebody has to step into the record, the public record, and say, I need this plant to stay open in order to power electricity in Virginia or in Michigan or in Pennsylvania. And when that happens, this bill will do it. This amendment only confiscates it, makes it harder to determine, And I would ask everyone to vote no, and I yield back.
And I want to compliment the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith. He is a strong advocate for his constituents back in coal country.